What's up, and welcome back to another episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Kenahan, and today's episode, or this week's episode of Keeping Up with the Commanders, we're going to be breaking down Washington's recently announced off-season practice dates in May and in June. That includes OTAs, that includes mandatory minicamp as well, two key first practices, the first time you see these guys on the field for the upcoming season, which would be great. And then I'm going to go into pick by pick some options for the Washington Commanders. This includes some dream scenarios at each pick, including pick 29, 61, and then, of course, the later picks on day 3. And then I'm also going to go into some more realistic scenarios and what could potentially happen. So let's just jump right into it, starting with the offseason dates, OTA dates, stuff like that. First day back in the office for these guys, which includes workouts and stuff like that, more lifting things, not really stuff on the field yet, is April 22nd. OTAs are May 27th and 28th. May 30th, June 2nd, June 3rd, and June 5th. So that 2-week stretch right there. And then mandatory minicamp will be June 10th through 12th. So I would expect rookie minicamp to be somewhere between before OTA, somewhere in the OTA range, probably before OTAs though, for Washington. So Washington starting off a little bit later than some of these other teams that, again, if you have a new coach, you can start very early in the offseason. So the Washington will be starting a few days later, but still some important key days to remember. Now, players that this could affect, especially mandatory minicamp and stuff like that, we got to keep an eye on Terry McLaurin and the situation there. Now, with Terry McLaurin, is he the type of person to hold out of a mandatory minicamp because he wants an extension? He does not seem to be that guy. And am I confident that Washington gets an extension done with him at some point this offseason? I'm very confident in that. So we'll have to keep an eye on Terry McLaurin. Again, McLaurin going into his final year of his contract and kind of looking for a new extension. So that is something to keep an eye on if you are a Washington fan. So that is something to watch. But really beyond that, a lot of these guys are on the rookie contracts. They're on 1 or 2 year deals. There's no superstars, you could say, that are entering that need a second contract. Again, Washington is still in that phase of Washington drafted very poorly from 2020 to 2023. And there's no one really that you would give a second contract to beyond Sam Cosmi, who already got a second contract last offseason. So there's not a lot of guys that you'd give a second contract to at this stage in this offseason. Now, down the line, you look at players like Jane Daniels, of course, Mike Sanders still. If they continue the success, you definitely want those guys on second contracts, and that will be more, will they hold out of OTAs, minicamp, stuff like that. But again, this offseason, there's really not much to kind of look at in terms of holdouts. Potentially Terry McLaurin, like I mentioned, because he could be looking for an extension. But again, he just does not seem to be that type of guy. So that is pretty much the offseason practice dates for the Washington Commanders. Keeping an eye on that. Let's move on, though, to the big thing that I want to talk about this week. And that is going pick by pick, looking at who could be available for the Washington Commanders and who Washington could be in the range of selecting at each pick, what could be some dream scenarios if some players were to fall, and stuff like that. So let's just jump right into it, starting with pick number 29. I think the big thing with pick number 29 is, will Washington pick at pick number 29? Because Washington only has 5 picks in this draft: a first, a second, a fourth, a 6th, and a 7th. So that is not a lot. That is not a lot if you're Washington. And you look at a guy like Adam Peters who loves to build through the draft. He had, 8 picks last season, 9 picks last season, and 5 of them were in the first 3 rounds, something crazy like that. So it just shows Washington and Adam Peters, the new regime, they want to build through the draft. And currently the draft capital they have is ranked 31st. 31st, according to Tankathon, which kind of measures the weight of your draft picks and how many draft picks you have as a team. Washington last season was ranked 2nd overall behind Arizona in terms of draft capital value in total. And now in this draft, they are ranked 31st. So it's for good reason. I mean, you trade for superstars like Marshawn Lattimore and Laramie Tunsil, hopefully, that are going to bring some some very good play next season, but you're just not going to have a lot of draft capital because of it, because Washington was very active in terms of what they were what they wanted to trade for these guys. So looking at 29 again, trading back would be a big option. But let's say they actually stick and pick here at 29. I would say the dream scenario for them is to get a top tier edge rusher in the range of a Shamar Stewart or a Mike Green. Shamar Stewart, a very good run stopper from Texas A&M. I've talked about his size, his athleticism. He was at both of these guys were at the Senior Bowl. Both of them left early, but they both showed why they deserve to be high first round picks. And the dream for Washington would be one of these guys falling to the Commanders back at pick number 29. I don't see that being the case. I think both of these guys go within the first 20 picks. First 15 picks, I think, is a good reality as well. But Shamar Stewart would be awesome in burgundy and gold. I think he can hold the edge. He can set the edge as a pass rusher, as a run stopper as well, which Washington really lacked in their edge rushers last season. Mike Green, he's maybe an undersized pass rusher, but the amount of tools and athletic tools and also just the amount of pass rush moves he has in his bag is very impressive. So Mike Green is someone I would keep an eye on as well if you were to fall. I know there is some, you could say, character concern surrounding Mike Green and his time at UVA, but maybe that leads him to fall, and we see some of these guys with character concerns fall in prior drafts, and some teams some teams are able to land some very good players because of it. So another guy I look into is Matthew Golden, the wide receiver of Texas. I've talked about him before on previous week's pods, but Matthew Golden, just bringing in a playmaker like him would be massive for Washington. His ability to catch passes, somehow catch pretty much every pass on a vertical route is awesome to see. He adjusts to the ball very well. He's a very good wide receiver, and I think pairing him up with Terry McLaurin would be an awesome duo. So Golden would also be the dream. I just don't think he'd be there at 29. If he is, though, that'd probably be my pick if I were Adam Peters. And then another guy I want to look at is Azrae Thomas out of Florida State. Thomas is man corner, press corner out of Florida State. Plays a lot like Marshawn Lattimore in terms of you can probably leave him on an island and be fine. So Thomas would be someone that I think would match Washington's scheme pretty well and what they want to do in the secondary, which is play man coverage. And so Thomas is someone I'd look at, but not entirely sure if Thomas is going to be there at 29. I am higher on him than most people are, but as well, so that could play a factor as he may be there and Washington might not pick him. But Thomas would be someone I'd look at. As far as picks that are more reality and picks that might actually will happen, or I would go with James Pierce. I think Pierce is someone that will fall a little bit and could be on the board at 29 for Washington. I think he's definitely going to go on the back half and the later half of the first round, potentially even fall into day two. So James Pierce is someone that I look at. I've talked about him before, the Tennessee pass rusher. He's got a good bag of moves, great power, great size, speed, and strength combination, which you love to see out of your pass rushers, especially now with tackles, of course, getting bigger and more athletic. Kind of a duo here that I would look at is Benjamin Morrison / Devon Revell. Morrison, the cornerback out of Notre Dame, and Revell, the cornerback out of East Carolina. Both of these guys are also man coverage corners. Revell can play a little bit both zone and man as well. But if I had to choose between the two, I'd probably go with Benjamin Morrison. I have a slightly higher grade on Revell. I think Morrison fits the scheme and what Washington wants to do as well in the secondary better than Revell. But those two could be some in that range as well, because both of them are coming off of season-ending injuries. It was a hip injury for Benjamin Morrison and a torn ACL for Devon Revell. So both of those guys are coming off of some pretty bad injuries, which for a corner is definitely a little bit risk. But I think those guys would be on the board. Both of them at this stage would be on the board at number 29. And then looking at a wide receiver that I think Washington could potentially pick at 29, it's Luther Burden, the wide receiver out of Missouri. Burden was an arguable wide receiver one in this class coming into this year. It was definitely a down year for Burden. Plus, there have been, again, those character issues with a guy like Burden as well that you kind of want to look at. But I think he's completely fine. I have a lower grade on Burden just overall. He's, I believe, my wide receiver 4 or 5 in this class. So, but I know his consensus is pretty much kind of early second round right now. So Burden is someone that will probably be on the board at 29. If not, maybe get taken a few picks beforehand. But someone Washington I think could look into. I know they've met with him a couple of times already as well. So Burden could be someone. And then a guy I really want to talk about that I got a chance to watch this week, watch some tape on him, and someone that I think someone that I think Washington could definitely fall in love with and overdraft him, you could say, or draft him higher than consensus, and that's Femi Oladipo out of UCLA. Femi Oladipo was someone who played off-ball linebacker for the Bruins for 2.5 years. And then about halfway through last season, he changed and went full-time edge rusher, full-time pass rusher off the edge. That he's never played the position before, and he was kind of thrown into it halfway through the season for UCLA, and he's done a very good job. He's a very good run stopper on the edge, which you love to see. His pass rush moves still need some work overall. His hand placements can be inconsistent. He doesn't really have a counter move. He loves attacking the outside. He's got good speed and some solid strength as well, that he loves attacking the outside shoulder of offensive tackles. But I need to see an inside move out of him at some point, which, again, he is a raw prospect, but I would look into him if I were the Washington Commanders, and I think they really have, because they met with him at the Senior Bowl. I believe they are also meeting with him on a top 30 visit as well. So Femi Oladipo could be someone Washington maybe overdrafts, or could be the pick at 29 that maybe not a lot of fans or casual fans are like, who is this guy, with James Pierce potentially on the board, and they go Oladipo instead. I would just look at that and be aware of that as a Washington fan, because I think this team really loves Femi Oladipo. Now, Oladipo, again, is kind of a consensus day 2 pick, but I would not be surprised if Washington drafts him in the first round. So that is kind of my breakdown of pick number 29. Let's move on to Washington's only day 2 pick, and that is pick number 61. I think at this pick, the dream would definitely be a Benjamin Morrison or Savon Rebel. I would sprint to the podium for either of these guys at pick number 61 right here. If Washington were to trade back from 29 and into maybe the 40s, I think that could also be a play for Washington to draft one of these corners that, again, are coming off some pretty bad injuries, but have the potential to be, again, Benjamin Morrison put out first-round tape in 2023. He was one of the best corners in the entire country in 2023. Ravel was having an awesome season until he tore his ACL at East Carolina. So both of these guys I would love in burgundy and gold, but I think pick 61, this would be the dream for them. I kind of see them going in the 40s and 50s range. If they fall farther than that, then maybe it is really a lot of teams are worried about the injury history for those guys. As far as some other players that would be the absolute dream, again, at 61, I don't see Emeka Ibuka being on the board here at 61. I would probably put him in the reality portion of pick number 29. I think he could definitely be in play at 29, but that would definitely be the dream if Ibuka somehow falls. And then Walter Nolan as well. Nolan is someone who I think could definitely go in the top 20 in this class, but could also fall out of the first round. So with the depth on this defensive line class, I love Walter Nolan. He's a great blend of a run stopper plus a pass rusher as well on the inside. But again, he is 7 schools in 8 years, which doesn't really pan out well in the league when you go to that many schools in 8 years. But Walter Nolan would be someone I'd be looking at if I were the Washington Commanders. And then some more guys, kind of just the reality for Washington at pick number 61, because this is a big gap from 29 to 61. There are a lot of players that are going to be picked in this, a lot of good players that are going to be picked between these two selections. So that's why I think a trade back at 29 would be probably the most likely thing for Washington to do. But more reality at 61, I think running back could be in play. I really think Washington needs depth at the running back position beyond Brian Robinson and beyond Austin Eckler. Both of those guys cannot stay healthy for an entire season. Plus, Eckler had those fumbling issues towards the back half of the season last year. Brian Robinson, his rookie contract is almost up, so he's not really someone that I would sign to a second deal as well. So both of those guys, I think you need some more electricity in that backfield. And a guy like TreVeyon Henderson out of Ohio State would be someone I would look at as someone who I think Washington could fall in love with, because he's a 5-year player for the Buckeyes. And so he's got the senior, he's a senior, he's 22 and a half years old, 5'9", 206. That is 33rd percentile height and 28th percentile weight. So he's a smaller running back, but oh boy, he can run. Physical pass blocker as well. He's got a high motor, vision, not a liability in my opinion. He's got a very special lateral ability with his feet, very quick feet. Team captain as well last year for Ohio State. Great character guy, able to weave through and quickly change windows and lanes easily. I love what I've seen out of TreVeyon Henderson. I have a 2nd-round grade on him. So it just shows I think Henderson would be awesome at pick number 61, because I think that's someone that Washington and Adam Peters, we know Peters loves to draft seniors and team captains, good character guys, or commanders, I believe, as they called it. And I think TreVeyon Henderson could have that tag as a commander. So that would be someone I'd keep an eye on. RJ Harvey out of UCF is someone that's getting a lot of hype recently as well. I still have to dive into his tape, but I know there's been a lot of 2nd-round hype for a guy like him as well. And then I already mentioned him, but I think 61 would be a good place to draft Femi Oladipo. I would be very happy if Washington gets him at 61 without having to trade up. I think Oladipo is someone that I believe I had an early 3rd-round grade on him, or a late 2nd. So this would be a great range to draft a guy like Oladipo. And then another edge rusher that I think could be in play for Washington, and this goes back to the commander tag, and someone I think could have that commander tag, is Josiah Stewart out of Michigan. The pass rusher, great run stopper on the edge. You kind of see a common trend here. I'm picking a lot of guys that are good run stopping edge rushers, and Josiah Stewart meets that. I think Stewart is one of the best run stopping edge rushers in this class. He did a great job for Michigan. Now he is very tiny. He is very, very tiny as a pass rusher, and I still think beyond his speed, he doesn't really have great strength, in my opinion, to draft him somewhat highly. So I'm trying to find a scouting report here. Yeah, so he transferred from Coastal Carolina. He's got elite speed on the outside, great blend, explosion off the snap. Doesn't really have a great strength. I think he gets knocked down a lot. Very tiny build. He's 6 foot 241, 2nd percentile height, 4th percentile weight. He's 22 years old. That is very, very tiny. I think he gets moved as well, just pushed around a lot. Maybe this comes back to bite me, but I think it takes him also too long to kind of beat tight ends and beat these smaller tight ends as well. So that is someone that I think Washington could keep an eye on as kind of a commander. Someone on the outside, if they don't go edge rusher early on and they want to address some other positions, Josiah Stewart down the line at pick number 61 could be someone that Washington could target. So I would keep an eye on him at number 61. I expect Washington to move up and down on day 1 and day 2, just because they only have 2 picks there. I don't expect them to stick and pick at both of them, because only having 2 picks in the first, 3 rounds or so, 3.5 rounds, that's not good. And that's not how Adam Peters, in my opinion, wants to build this team. So let's move on to day 3, though. Washington has 3 picks on day 3. Pick number 128 is where I think I'm targeting a wide receiver if I'm the Commanders. If not a wide receiver, I'm going like a project offensive tackle in this scenario. 128, I think, is in good position to draft a guy like a Kyle Williams out of Washington State. I've talked about him many times, but also a hometown guy, a guy who went to Stonebridge High School in Ashburn, Virginia, Ty Felton. I love Ty Felton. I had a chance to talk with him at the Senior Bowl. He's a great guy out of Maryland. He went to Maryland, and I've talked with him at Stonebridge. They run a wing T offense. It's a lot of runs in that. So Felton didn't really get that many targets in that Stonebridge offense. And then he kind of moved to more of an air raid offense at College Park, and he thrived. So Ty Felton, I believe I had a 4th-round grade on him. He'd be someone that I would keep an eye on at pick number 128. Especially, I would look at if Washington has a pro day on their own, kind of like their own pro day, which they've had in years past. Ty Felton would be someone I think would be invited to that, just because they usually invite a lot of kind of players who have played in colleges, played at colleges around the area, around the DMV, and Ty Felton meets that criteria. So I would expect him to go to something like that if I was Washington. And additionally, As far as a project tackle goes, I think Johnny Cornelius at pick number 128, I would not be mad at. Cornelius was the right tackle for Oregon this past season. I definitely think Washington needs some depth on the offensive line. Yes, you have Laramie Tunsil. You got the left tackle position figured out. I expect Brandon Coleman to be the right tackle now. I think Brandon Coleman will move to right tackle, and then Wiley will probably kick inside until Sam Cosmi gets healthy. But you can never have too many good offensive linemen or too many offensive linemen, I believe, on a team, and too much good depth. So I think Washington definitely needs to draft an offensive lineman at some point in this draft class, and I think Johnny Cornelius at 128 could be an option. So then those are 3 picks for Washington, and then they don't have a 4th pick in the draft until 205 and then 245 in the 6th and 7th rounds. At this point, you're just going for depth if you're the Washington Commanders. I know a lot of Washington fans love Kyron Lacy, the wide receiver at LSU, teammates with Jane Daniels. This could be an option where Washington would select him. I know that Lacy is definitely in some legal trouble right now. And overall, I just don't think this regime would draft someone like Kyron Lacy or take that risk in drafting someone like Kyron Lacy, just because of what we've seen from this regime so far since they've taken over. Look at how they dealt with the Brandon McManus situation and some of these other situations as well. Just look at how they've dealt with like players in legal trouble in the past. I don't see them taking a chance on Kyron Lacy unless he's maybe a UDFA or unless this kind of gets figured out before the draft. But I know a lot of Washington fans want that reunion, and we're just going to have to wait and see, because I am very interested to see where Kyron Lacy goes in this draft and who he goes to. So Lacy would be someone I think could be an option late on day 3 if Washington were to go that route. I think also a project tackle in this scenario, if you don't go one early on, looking at Carson Vincent, the Alabama A&M tackle, probably would move to the interior, but still some more added offensive lineman depth. And then Chase Lunt out of UConn could be someone that I would look at as well. Someone maybe, I mean, both of those guys as well went to the Senior Bowl, but I would expect maybe a Senior Bowl player at this stage. Maybe Georgia wide receiver Arian Smith could be an option. Arian Smith had a pretty solid Senior Bowl, in my opinion. Someone that I'm not entirely that high on, but someone that I think Washington could look at. And then UCF cornerback Mac McWilliams, I love a lot. He moved very well. He was moving very well. I love his lower body and his footwork at the Senior Bowl in Mobile. I thought he had a great week there in Mobile. So Mac McWilliams could be someone Washington could keep an eye on late on day 3. And then just a name I want to throw out there, Howard Cross was one of the best defensive tackles out of Notre Dame. Well, he's out of Notre Dame, but Howard Cross III was one of the best defensive tackles in 2023 in the entire country. He had a down year last year. I wonder what's going to happen with him. Could we see Washington taking a chance on him to build up that interior depth on the defensive line as well? But yeah, that is pretty much going to be all of the guys that I'm kind of looking at if I am the Washington Commanders on with these picks. Now, I expect Washington to make some moves and not make a selection at all of these picks. I would expect some trades. If I'm Adam Peters and the Washington Commanders, I probably think there's a bigger chance Washington trades out of pick number 29 than makes a selection there as of now, because only having 2 picks in the first 120 is not great. It's not great if you're Washington. So I would expect Adam Peters, if he wants to build through the draft, he's going to have to require more picks. Washington, like I mentioned earlier, has the 31st strongest, or if you want to say second weakest, draft capital in the 2025 NFL draft, according to Tankathon's metrics. So that'll pretty much wrap this episode up, though, of Keeping Up with the Commanders. It was great breaking down the draft stuff. We've got more draft content coming up. Again, send me your guys' mock drafts so I can break them down in a future episode. I'm looking forward to that. We are only 2 or 3 episodes, I believe, away, 2 episodes away, I believe, from the NFL draft. That is awesome. So I might have to do that, but that might be a segment next week, is breaking down your guys' mock drafts. So that'll wrap up this week's episode, though, of Keeping Up with the Commanders. I'm your host, Mason Kenahan. See you guys next one. Peace.